Boker Tov. We're going to give just another minute before we get started. It's called for 10. We should wait till 10. All right. Boker Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this morning's program, this class that I'm running, which will actually be running every morning, Monday to Thursday, this week and next, bringing us right up until Pesach. The class is called Metok Midvash, which means sweeter than honey. And it's going to be mystical insights into the Pesach Seder. I hope you are able to glean something from these sessions. They'll be brief. They'll be 20 minutes every day, just because there's a lot going on in advance of Pesach. So just want to get something out there so we can really try to connect deeply, and it'll be just a few ideas at a time. Now, this is not going to be a commentary on the Haggadah. It will be utilizing a particular text. This is it. It is a Haggadah shel Pesach. It is a Pesach Haggadah with a commentary. There it is in Hebrew, Metok Midvash. I think the screen is reversed, so if it is, hopefully you can read Hebrew backwards. This Metok Midvash commentary, it is actually a commentary on the Zohar, that the big book of Kabbalah that was revealed in the book of Radiance, that was revealed in the 1200s in Spain, probably put pen to paper by Rabbi Moshe de Leon, but attributed to the sage, the Mishnaic and Talmudic sage, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It is really the revelation of what we call the secrets of Torah, or the deeper levels of Torah, and what people have now come to term as Jewish mysticism. Now, I never really liked that idea of Jewish mysticism, because Judaism does not want us to become mystical. That is to say, we are not supposed to separate ourselves from the masses, right? There's actually a mitzvah, al tifrosh min hatzibur. Don't separate yourself from the congregation. Tzibur is tzadik, beit, and reish, and people say that's tzadik, benoni, and rasha. It's an acronym for a righteous person, an intermediate person where most of us dwell, and a rasha, a completely evil person. And the tzibur is everyone coming together. We're not supposed to separate ourselves from that. We're supposed to recognize we are part of this all together. Anyway, so when we think of mystics, we think of people who are often separating themselves, going up onto mountaintops and meditating all day. The truth is that the story in the Talmud, Masechet Shabbat, page 31, tells about Rabbi Shimon that he had to run and escape for his life, that the Romans were out to get him and to kill him, and because he had insulted them. And he had to run and hide, and he hid in a cave on a mountain in Israel, called the mountain is called Piki'in, or the town is called Piki'in. You can go visit it to this very day. You can see where the cave he hid in is to this very day. And he had to run and hide there. And it was in his time there, he was hiding with his son. They hid for 13 years. And it was during that 13 years that apparently Elijah, the prophet, would appear to them and would teach them these concepts in the Zohar. And these are, again, they're considered Jewish mysticism, but Jewish mysticism is something that is supposed to be rational. These are concepts that are lofty, but they're concepts that we're supposed to be able to experience, that we're supposed to recognize them within ourselves, within our own minds, within our own hearts. The Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer, founder of the modern Hasidic movement in the 1700s, he was famous for taking these Jewish mystical concepts and bringing them down to more of a basic psychology, to what these deep concepts mean when it comes to just how we exist in the world and how we approach Judaism in our daily lives. That these deep things are actually just a description of what's going on deep in ourselves. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at these mystical insights into the Pesach Seder to really understand how the Seder is supposed to affect us, right? Because there's really something that happens too much in the Jewish world. I know it's happened for me in my own life more regularly than not, and I know for a fact it happens to other people as well, where we go through the motions of a mitzvah, especially when it comes to Pesach. We might sit down with our families, We might have a Seder plate and some matzah, and we'll go through the Haggadah, and we'll have 4 cups of wine, and we'll say the blessings when we're supposed to say blessings, and we'll say the words that are there. We might even read some commentaries out of the Haggadot that we are using. But at the end of the day, okay, I had my Seder. We're outside of Israel here, so we'll have a second Seder on the second night, and then Pesach, and then back to usual, right? We get back to real life, right? Quote unquote, real life, regular living, nothing's different very, very quickly. But that's not what's supposed to happen. At the Pesach Seder, we're supposed to truly and deeply internalize what freedom is all about. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to explore some excerpts from this commentary. I'm going to read it all what we call outside. I'm not going to necessarily quote the book so often, but what I will do is I will present the teachings of the book, of this commentary, so that we can, for ourselves, understand some of these mystical concepts, these deeper underlying experiences, these transformational experiences that are supposed to be taking place at the Pesach Seder. And just so you all know, I will always have a cup of coffee. Bezrat Hashem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh bidbaro. Okay, here we go. So first, we need to understand what the Pesach Seder is all about. It's a beautiful thing. There's a Hasidic teaching that in Israel, you ask somebody, Ma shlomcha, how are you? Often the response will be, Hakol beseder. Everything is in order. The word seder means order, right? Just like our Sidur, our prayer book, orders our prayers. Our Pesach Seder, we all know there is an order to it. Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. We might even have a song. Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. Right? We have all of these ideas. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so we have all of these ideas, and there we go. We have all of these ideas in the Pesach Seder that we have an order of operations. We start at Kadesh and we work our way to Nirtzah. Now, we're going to eventually talk about this order, but it won't be today. It'll probably be tomorrow. Today, I want to just explore what the Haggadah is and what the purpose of the Seder is all about, and how this Seder, how this whole Passover experience is supposed to truly affect us in our kishkas, truly supposed to transform us into freer people. And so we start off talking about the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, the story of the Exodus from Egypt. This is a very important thing. When it comes down to Passover, the most important thing that's supposed to happen is the telling of the story of leaving Egypt, right? If you do nothing else, the idea is to tell the next generation and to impart to the next generation that this story happened, that our ancestors were slaves in Egypt, and through miracles, really, things beyond nature, we were freed from Egypt. That's it. That is the essence. We have to come to know that. So how do we do that? How do we come to really affect ourselves like this? The idea is by reflecting on these miracles, by reflecting on the amazing things that happened to our ancestors when they left Egypt, the way we were taken out of slavery, that we need to, that the more we are able to speak about those matters, the more they're able to penetrate our hearts. The idea here is, he says, Chayav lotzi hadvarim mipiv. You have to say these things out of your mouth in order that your heart will be awakened. It's a very amazing thing that our hearts can be awakened through the words of our mouths. And I think that's such an important thing, right? It's one thing to think, right? I can think certain things, I can even feel certain things, but unless I'm able to express those same things, have them come out of my lips, out of my mouth, I'm never going to truly internalize them. It's very interesting. We're reading right now the parashiot, the Torah readings of Tazria and Mitzorah, which are all about these spiritual affliction as a physical manifestation called mitzorah, or tzaraat, which is, some people say is leprosy or other things. It's probably none of those things that people say. But the reason that it happened, that a person was afflicted, was because of destructive speech, right? There's that old idea that, we've all, I'm sure we've all heard before, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? We all know that's fundamentally not true, that sticks and stones may break our bones, but then our bones will heal. The names that people call us can penetrate deeply into our hearts and torment us for decades and decades and decades, right? Not so simple, right? The words that come out of our mouths are so powerful. And so these two parashiot that we're reading right now are all about the power of our words, both to harm, but also to heal. And that's where the Pesach Seder comes in, that the words of our mouths here are coming to heal us and coming to awaken our hearts to what it means to be free. And this goes to such an extent, something that is said in the Haggadah, which we'll see later, that even somebody who knows all of these stories, even somebody who is well-versed in the story of the Exodus from Egypt, somebody who has read and learned many, many of these commentaries, is still obligated on the nights of Pesach to say these stories out loud, even by yourself. You still say everything out loud, because it is through saying it out loud that you give it power, you give it energy. There's actually a big science of sound right now, and even using sound in the military, that they're creating sound weapons, which will knock a person down just based on incredible levels of sound. We all know sometimes you hear too many sounds and you can't hear anything else. That sound has a very strong influence on us. And so that's really what we're saying. Through the words of our mouth, through telling the story, our hearts will be awakened to remember the miracles that took us out. And the truth is, when it comes to everything we do, Jewishly, we're supposed to say the words. Every time you're learning Torah, really we're supposed to say the words out loud. When we're saying our tefillot, we're supposed to say the words out loud. Even the Amidah, which is supposed to be the silent prayer or have a silent component to it, our sages say you're supposed to say it loud enough that you'll hear it, but quiet enough that the person next to you won't hear it. Right? We have to hear our own voices, because it is in that flow of the words coming out of our mouths and going into our ears that truly we can internalize these ideas. Now, this idea of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, we have to understand, is foundational to everything we do as Jews. Everything. In every tefillah that we have, every prayer that we have, there is a mitzvah to remember Egypt. In the morning and the evening, when we say the Shema Yisrael, the full declaration of Hashem Echad, and we go through all three paragraphs, they all end with Ani Hashem Elokechem asher tzeitti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelokim Ani Hashem Elokechem emet, which means I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God, in order for you to truly understand what God is all about. I am Hashem, your God, am truth, right? The whole concept is we acknowledge Yetziat Mitzrayim every morning, every evening. But every kiddush that we ever make, whether on Shabbat, on Pesach, on another holiday, all of it has this word, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, to remember the Exodus from Egypt. As part of our prayers on Shabbat, we say multiple times, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. This is to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Why is everything about remembering the Exodus? Because what happened then changed us and changed the world. It's an amazing concept, right? When there's no one person, right? This concept of we left Egypt as a nation wasn't mentioned by Moses in the Torah. He wasn't standing on Har Sinai and came down to a whole group of people and said, listen, we as a nation left Egypt. No one's going to tell you what happened, right? No, he's confirming for us in the book, saying we left Egypt, right? Remember how we left Egypt? Make sure you tell your kids and make sure that they tell their kids. And that's the whole concept here, that we have to understand that everything it is to be a Jew is all about this idea of not only remembering that Hashem took us out of slavery in Egypt, but that we're supposed to impart that story and that reality to the next generation, right? And that's really what it is, that, people can say, when it comes to trying to explain what is God, or see if people believe in God or don't believe in God, people can say and think and believe whatever they want. But fundamentally, what we say is, God took us out of Egypt with miracles. This was above and beyond the regular ways of nature, right? And how do we know? Because we experienced it. We saw nature shift. We saw things that were fundamentally unnatural happen, that were specifically for the purpose and resulted in our exodus, where we were slaves for hundreds of years with almost no sense of self, no sense of identity, to the point where we almost lost everything that we were. And Hashem, by miracles, separated us from the other people and brought us out as a free nation. It's an incredible thing if we think about it. I'm going to use the example quickly. If we think in America and the whole idea of the slavery of the African slaves, who are now, thank God, free, and they are African Americans, and with ostensibly the rights of every American, as they should have. But let's think about it like this: we weren't just freed within Egyptian society; we were freed and took hold of our own identity and left and reestablished it in our homeland. It would have been the idea of, instead of there just being emancipation, that the entire African American community would have united and said, we are not like the rest of these Americans. Let's reclaim our own personal heritage and identity, and let's go back to our ancestral homelands and reaffirm who we are there. That didn't happen. That won't happen. I don't think it needs to happen, but that is what happened to the Jewish people. That is what happened to the Israelites, that we were in Egypt, we lost our identity, and by miracles, we were separated from the average Egyptian, and then we were freed from that slavery by these miracles. And again, this is the most important thing that we have to convey to our children, to the next generations, because that's ultimately how we know it's true, right? Yes, I can read it in a book. Sure, I can see the story in the Chumash, in the Torah, but the way I know it's true is because my father told me. The way he knew it's true, it's because his father told him. The way he knew it's true, it's because his father told him, and on and on and on and on and on, until, because they were there as it happened, right? It's such a strong thing. The reason the Pesach Seder is one of the most central tenets of Judaism is because it is the source of Judaism, and it gives us our strength as a people to say, we went through this experience collectively. It has already touched us deeply in our hearts. Now we need to reconnect ourselves by telling this story. Now let's get into some of the more mystical stuff. Now there's a concept that when we left, it was sudden, right? We left in a moment. Now, when we look at the story of the 10 plagues happening to Egypt, when we're reading in the Chumash and the Torah, it goes through in a couple of weeks. It's Parshat Shmot, Vayera, and a little bit of Bo until we're free. It's 3 weeks we get through the whole thing. But in real time, this whole story took about a year, from Moshe showing up and standing in front of Paro to Moshe walking out of Egypt, leading the entire Jewish people behind him. And really Hashem taking us out with Moshe at the helm. And we have to recognize that this is the source of who we are, right? That it's really in this way that Hashem revealed himself to us, because it didn't happen according to the natural order of things. The natural order of things is, if somebody wants to become emancipated, if somebody wants to take some sort of power for themselves, they have to rise up in the ranks of power, and then from there they can have their influence. One of the most remarkable things in this situation is we never had that influence in Egypt. We had nothing in Egypt, and yet we were still able to rise up and just say, we're leaving, goodbye. Now, there's a really important thing, which I said before about losing our identity. And this is going to be the last point for now. In the Kabbalistic ideas, there are 50 levels of purity and 50 levels of impurity. That once you reach the 50th level of purity, you have no higher to go. You are essentially an angel. There's no more work to be done. You have transcended what it means to have choice, to be a human being. Same is true the other way. Remember we said before about the tzibur, the tzaddik, benoni, and rasha, right? The righteous, the intermediate, and the evil, right? So let's say that 50th level of purity is the tzaddik, the perfect one, right? The middle would be everyone in between, and the rasha, the evil, would be the 50th level of impurity. Now, it teaches that in Egypt, we had fallen to the 49th level of impurity. 49 levels down. So much so that our sages say that if we had been there for one more instant, we would have potentially fallen to the 50th level of impurity. That is, we would have started to personally identify with our misbehavior, right? It's one thing, we all do the wrong things sometimes, right? We all have our stuff. But often, most of the time, when we have our stuff, we don't identify with our stuff. Yes, I did the wrong thing. Okay, fine, but I can recognize that. I can recognize I have ways to improve. When somebody's on the 50th level of impurity, they truly identify with it. If we had fallen in Egypt to the 50th level of impurity, we would have started to say our entire identity is that of a slave. I am a slave. And not only that, I almost choose to be it because that is the essence of who I am. We had fallen to that 49th level and we're on the brink of the 50th level when, in an instant, very, very fast, Hashem took us out of Egypt. And it is that Hashem brings us out. And we know we go from Pesach to Shavuot, 50 days from the time we leave Egypt to receiving the Torah. And that count is, they say, our rabbis teach, is actually our elevation, level by level, from the 49th level of impurity to the 49th level of purity. And the reception of the Torah is that 50th level. So the more we can connect to the Torah, the more we'll connect to our freedom, to the essence of who we are. It's an interesting teaching in Pirkei Avot, and this is how I'll wrap up, that in the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot, it talks about the words of the Torah, and it says, Charut al haluchot, right? They were engraved on the tablets. It says, don't read it as charut, but read it as cherut. Don't read it as they were engraved on the tablets, but read it as they were freed upon the tablets. Our whole freedom was founded on the Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt and coming to embrace Torah. We'll talk more about that as we move on. Oh, sorry, I didn't finish. And Pirkei Avot, it goes on and says, Ein bein charin ela mi she'osek b'talmud Torah. There's no such thing as a free person, other than somebody who is involved in the study of Torah. That is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this sweeter than honey session. And Bezrat Hashem, we'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for another one. Also, this will be posted on the Beth Emeth YouTube channel this evening. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Shalom.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you. It was